Good morning and welcome to the August 19 edition of the PIOJ's quarterly press briefing. We welcome persons who are face-to-face here at the PIOJ, those who are on Zoom, and even further afield but not too far, listeners and watchers on our Facebook platform. Do share with others who are not here as yet so that we can get as many people listening to the update. There will be a presentation after which your questions and comments will be welcomed and they'll be screened, and after that they'll be put into the room. If you are in the room or on Zoom, do raise your hand and you'll be able to speak for everyone to hear. If you're on YouTube, type your question in and we will put it in the line, in the queue. Our host today is Senior Technical Advisor to the Director General at the PIOJ, Mrs. Rochelle White, who will guide our proceedings. Have a great day.
Thank you so much, Gwyneth. Good morning, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, key stakeholders of the Planning Institute of Jamaica, colleagues, good morning. Welcome to the PIOJ's quarterly press briefing. Welcome to those persons who are joining us in the room and those persons who are online. Today, the Director General, Dr. Wayne Henry, will provide a preliminary overview of economic performance for the April to June 2025 quarter, and he will also outline the short-term outlook for the economy. This morning, Dr. Henry is supported by Mr. James Stewart, Principal Director for the Economic Planning and Research Division. As Gwyneth indicated, we will be taking questions once the DG has concluded his presentation. Dr. Henry, the floor is now yours. You can begin.
Thank you very much, Rochelle. Good morning, everyone. Before I provide the details on economic performance, let me remind you of the purpose of these quarterly economic estimates provided by the PIOJ. The PIOJ presents preliminary estimates on economic performance for each quarter. This is based on early information provided by major data providers. The provision of preliminary estimates is consistent with trends in modern economies globally, where it is a common practice to release a first, second, and even a third preliminary estimate before the final figures are provided. The PIOJ releases the preliminary growth estimate approximately 6 weeks following the end of the quarter being reviewed, while Statin releases the official figures at the end of the third month following the quarter being reviewed. Various stakeholders, including our international development partners, the private sector, as well as the government, use the preliminary data to inform critical planning and policy-related decisions. This quarter's report marks the first since the release of the revised GDP format by the Statistical Institute of Jamaica, Statin. In accordance with the 2008 System of National Accounting, SNA, the update became effective as at the January to March 2025 quarter, and currently includes revisions going back to 2015. The adoption of the 2008 SNA replaces the previously used 1993 SNA. This update brings Jamaica's economic reporting in line with international best practices and enhances the country's ability to generate timely and relevant data for policy and development planning. As part of the revision, Statin has also implemented the Jamaica Industrial Classification 2016, JIC 2016, and rebased the country's constant price GDP estimates to the year 2015, replacing the previous 2007 base year. These methodological enhancements, supported by updated classifications, new data sources, and improved measures of household consumption and informal sector activity, resulted in an average increase of 7.8% in GDP levels between 2015 and 2023. It should be noted that the revisions undertaken by Statin were independently reviewed and accepted by key development partners, reinforcing the credibility of these updates. Some of the implications from the revisions are: 1. Changes in the National Accounts classification of industries. For example, electricity and water supply industry is now renamed Electricity, Water Supply and Waste Management. Waste management was previously captured in the other services industry. 2, the transport, storage, and communication industry is now the transport and storage industry. To capture telecommunication activities, a new industry named information and communication has been added. The producers of government services industry is now renamed public administration and defense industry. The hotels and restaurants industry is now renamed the accommodation and food service activities industry. And the other services industry is now renamed education, health, and other services industry. Also, the increase in nominal GDP levels and its impact on key variables, for example, the debt to GDP ratio. The debt to GDP ratio for fiscal year 2024-25 was previously estimated at 67.3%. The more accurate accounting for output levels has resulted in a higher GDP level for the fiscal year, and as such, the debt to GDP ratio is now 62.4%. And this brings the country closer to the mandated fiscal year 2027-28 target in debt to GDP of 60%. Today, we are reporting that the Jamaican economy recorded an estimated growth of 1.4% compared with the corresponding quarter, April to June of 2024. The outturn for the review quarter largely reflected continued growth in most industries. Agriculture, forestry, and fishing, and the accommodation and food services industries, 2 industries that were hardest hit by the weather-related disruptions of 2024, were key drivers of this positive performance. Both industries have entered into a new growth phase, with current output levels surpassing their pre-Hurricane Beryl output levels. Among the factors influencing the performance during the review quarter were 1, growth in the economies of Jamaica's major trading partners, which supported external demand, and 2, increased domestic demand for goods and services, supported by a strengthening in both consumer and business confidence levels, pushed by a positive perception of current economic conditions, as well as optimism surrounding business prospects, and a higher level of employment facilitated by an increase in the employed labor force by 24,200 persons. Real sector developments. Developments in the goods producing industry. The goods producing industry grew by an estimated 3.8%, with improved performances recorded for 3 of the 4 industries, namely agriculture, forestry and fishing, manufacturing, and construction. The mining and quarrying industry was estimated to have recorded a contraction due to weakened demand and technical challenges. Agriculture, forestry, and fishing. Real value added for the agriculture industry grew by an estimated 9.8%. This outturn primarily reflected the impact of more favorable weather conditions, which contributed to an increase in output per hectare and an 11% expansion in the area of domestic crops reaped. Based on current output levels, the industry has fully recovered from the shock of Hurricane Beryl and is now in a new growth phase. The performance of the industry stemmed from 1, a 14.1% growth in the output of other agricultural crops. Increased production was recorded in all 9 crop groups, led by cereals up 27.8%, potatoes up 22.9%, vegetables up 18.9%, condiments up 18.5%, yams up 11.1%, and legumes up 7.4%. 2, growth of 2.7% in traditional export crops, which largely reflected higher production of coffee, up 8.6%, and banana, up 4%. These increases were sufficient to outweigh estimated declines in cocoa and sugarcane production. 3, a 3.6% expansion in post-harvest activities, reflecting increased availability of coffee berries for roasting. And 4, a 3.1% increase in animal farming, which was attributed to an increase in poultry meat production of 6.6%. This was sufficient to outweigh a 25.5% decline in egg production. Mining and quarrying. Real value added for the mining and quarrying industry decreased by 3.5%, reflecting declines in both alumina and crude bauxite production. Specifically, alumina production, the heavier weighted component, contracted by 5.5%. Lower production was a result of reduced demand as well as technical challenges associated with equipment failure at one plant. The alumina capacity utilization rate was 39.5%, down 2.3 percentage points compared with the corresponding quarter of 2024. Crude bauxite production down 1.5%, reflecting reduced demand from a major overseas purchaser. The bauxite capacity utilization rate decreased by 0.5 percentage point to 35.4% and reduced production of most quarrying materials surveyed. The largest declines were registered for limestone, marl and fill, gypsum, and pozzolan. Manufacturing. Real value added for the manufacturing industry was estimated to have grown by 1.4%. Increased output was estimated for both the other manufacturing and the food, beverages, and tobacco sub-industries. Within the food, beverages, and tobacco sub-industry, higher production was pushed by poultry meat, up 5.4%, and dairy products, up 24.6%. These were sufficient to outweigh the decline in beverage production, reflected in lower output of beer and stout, down 19.8%, and rum and alcohol, down 4.7%. For the other manufacturing sub-industry, the estimated increase in output was mainly due to petroleum products, reflecting higher production of turbo fuel, up 118.5%, automotive diesel oil, ADO, up 81.9%, fuel oil, up 54.6%, and asphalt, up 84.7%. Further growth in this sub-industry was stymied by an estimated contraction in the non-metallic minerals component, reflecting lower production of cement, down 38.2%, and clinker, down 66.6%. The decline in cement and clinker production was attributed to the closure of the plant to facilitate an expansion project. Construction. An estimated growth of 1.6% in real value added was recorded for the construction industry, reflecting an upturn in both the building construction and other construction components. Preliminary data on sales of construction inputs indicate a 0.8% increase in real terms, while cement supply to the market expanded by 8.5%. The building construction component is estimated to have grown, reflecting a 745.9% increase in housing starts by the NHT. The performance was driven by 2,077 new starts at the Longville Park Housing Scheme. Additionally, higher work in progress was supported by the strong increase in housing starts reported in the previous quarter. The growth in the other construction component was due to higher capital expenditure on civil engineering activities. Among the entities recording increased expenditure was the Port Authority of Jamaica, PAJ, up 743.7% to $1.2 billion, reflecting rehabilitation works on docks and berths at the Ocho Rios Pier. Developments in the services industry. The services industry was estimated to have grown by 0.5%, reflecting higher real value added for all industries, with the exception of electricity, water, and waste management, and real estate and business activities, which declined. Electricity, water supply, and waste management. The electricity, water supply, and waste management industry recorded a contraction of 2.7% in real value added, reflecting lower electricity consumption, which offset an increase in water consumption. Electricity consumption decreased by 4.7%, reflecting lower consumption for 5 of 6 categories. Residential was down 3.5%. General service, that's small businesses using less than 25 kilovolt ampere kVA, was down 3.9%. Power service, that's large businesses using more than 25 kVA but less than 500 kVA, was down 3.5%. Large power, businesses using more than 500 kVA, was down 12.5%. And largest power, that single locations with a minimum peak demand of 2,000 kVA, was down 5.9%. However, street lighting plus traffic signals increased by 1.2%. Kingston and St. Andrew continue to account for the largest share of electricity sales at 33.8%, followed by St. Catherine at 17.1% and St. James at 11.1%. With respect to water consumption, there was an increase of 1.7% due to higher consumption of 0.7% in the Eastern Division and 3.7% in the Western Division. Transport and storage. Real value added for the transport and storage industry was estimated to have grown by 1.3% due to an increase in both components. The transport component was impacted by increases in total air passenger movements, which was up 0.8%, and the movement in the volume of maritime cargo was up 3.5%. The industry's performance was also supported by an increase in the land transport subcomponent, reflected in higher number of buses dispatched by the JUTC. The average number of buses dispatched increased by 28.1% to 187 per month. And this resulted in increases of 19.1% to 4.9 million in the number of revenue passenger trips and 1.2% to $26 million in the revenue from charter trips. The storage component was estimated to have grown consistent with the increase in the volume of maritime cargo handled at the major ports. WR Trim. Real value added for the wholesale and retail trade, repair of motor vehicles, and installation of machinery and equipment, WR Trim industry, is estimated to have grown by 0.3%, pushed by an increase of 4.9% in total gross sales. Higher sales were recorded for 7 of the 8 categories, including motor vehicle, auto repairs and accessories, up 13.1%, other wholesale and retail sales of goods and services, up 10.4%, textiles, clothing, shoes and jewelry, up 5.2%, retail sales of pharmaceuticals, medical goods and cosmetics, up 3.9%. Financial and insurance activities. Real value added for the financial and insurance activities industry was estimated to have grown by 1% during the review quarter. The performance reflected the impact of an increase in net interest income due to a rise in the stock of loans and advances at deposit-taking institutions, and higher income from fees and commission supported by increased utilization of financial services. Accommodation and food services activities. Real value added for the accommodation and food service activities industry grew by an estimated 2.5%, driven by a rise in stopover arrivals. Preliminary data on stopover arrivals for the review quarter stood at 743,720 visitors, an increase of 1.6% compared with the corresponding quarter of 2024. Preliminary visitor expenditure for April to May 2025 increased by 7.6% to US $697 million compared with the corresponding period of 2024. Looking at the employment update. Regarding the employment update, the highlights for April 2025 are as follows. The unemployment rate was 3.3%, with the male unemployment rate at 2.5% and the female unemployment rate at 4.3%. The youth unemployment rate was 10.1%, with male youth unemployment at 8.1% and the female youth unemployment rate at 12.6%. The employed labor force stood at 1,444,500 as at April 2025. Males accounted for 53.3% of the employed labor force, with females accounting for 46.7%. The unemployed labor force was 50,000 persons as at April 2025. GDP performance for January to June of 2025. For the first 6 months of 2025, real GDP is estimated to have grown by 1.2%. The goods producing industry grew by 2.9%, while the services industry grew by 0.7%. The industries which were estimated to have recorded the largest increases during the first half of the year were agriculture, forestry, and fishing, up 6.4%, information and communication, up 3.6%, accommodation and food service activities, up 1.8%, and manufacturing, up 1.6%. The short-term outlook, July to September 2025, and fiscal year 2025-26. Turning now to the short-term economic outlook, short-term prospects for the overall economy are positive, largely associated with the continuation of the recovery momentum as all industries are projected to record growth. This performance will largely be supported by 1. The recovery from the low production base during the corresponding quarter of 2024, when most industries were adversely impacted by Hurricane Beryl. In particular, agriculture production continues to benefit from the post-hurricane support to the industry, which has resulted in record levels of production for several crop groups. And this is what we call the new growth phase. And this augurs well for the related WR trim industry. 2, it is anticipated that the electricity, water, and waste management industry will record strong growth, as this industry was one of the most affected during Hurricane Beryl during the corresponding quarter of 2024. 3, preliminary data on the mining and quarrying industry for July 2025 showed that alumina production increased by 18.3%. The performance was largely due to the recovery as the industry was adversely impacted by Hurricane Beryl, which damaged the port at Rocky Point, causing a temporary halt to production and export activities. 4, strengthening of domestic demand associated with higher levels of employment, improved business and consumer confidence, and the traditional bump in spending during periods of intense election campaigning. And 5, ongoing retooling and capacity expansion in the manufacturing and accommodation and food service activities industries. Cement production is expected to record strong growth, consequent on the completion of plant expansion works, while the accommodation sector will benefit from the increased room stock and several summer events which spurred visitor arrivals to the island. Preliminary data on airport arrivals for July 2025 indicate a 16.5% increase in visitors. Against this background, for the July to September 2025 quarter, it is anticipated that the economy will grow within the range of 2% to 3%. For fiscal year 2025-26, the PIOJ's fiscal year projection is for real GDP growth within the range of 1% to 2%. So in closing, the preliminary data presented on performance for the April to June 2025 quarter indicate a continued strengthening of performance following the weather-related shocks in the latter half of 2024. Most industries have already fully recovered and have recorded output levels indicating a new growth phase having been attained. The short-term outlook for the July to September quarter reflects the expectation of the combined impact of the low base effect as well as the current growth momentum, which will result in the realization of stronger rates of growth. The main downside risks to this projection are the possibility of adverse weather conditions disrupting productive activities in key industries, and weakened external demand consequent on the disruptions in trade caused by the implementation of increased tariffs by the USA. Despite the challenges that abound, we remain optimistic as we continue to closely monitor and assess these developments. And in closing, I want to acknowledge and thank the very dedicated team here at the PIOJ. I encourage us all to continue our collaborative effort and to remain disciplined and responsible as we sustain our efforts to make Jamaica the place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business. Thank you. God bless you all.
Thank you so much, Dr. Henry, for your presentation. We are now opening the floor for your questions. Questions, comments? Any questions from any of our platforms, Gwyneth? Okay, I'm seeing there are no questions yet, just allowing a few more moments. I assume the presentation was very clear. All right, going once, going twice, gone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I invite you to join us again in mid-November 2025, when we will have the presentation on economic performance for the July to September 2025 quarter, as well as short-term projections. Confirming with the team that there are no more questions, no questions at all. Okay, as Gwyneth is indicating, we will be posting the documents, both the press brief, speaking notes from Dr. Henry, as well as the PowerPoint presentation on our website this afternoon.
Question that has come in.
Okay, I'm seeing it. So there's a question from Siobhan Campbell, and it asks, would you describe the country's economic recovery as V-shaped?
Country's economic recovery as V-shaped?
Yes.
It's a quick recovery, but the rate of growth is still fairly modest. So, slightly V, but not. Yes, but it's a sharp recovery. It didn't plateau for too long.
Okay. There's another question from Kelly Ray Miles. Can the DG say a little more about how the upcoming election will impact the current quarter?
Traditionally, so thank you, Kelly Ray. Traditionally, there is, as we mentioned, with intense election campaigning, you do see some increase in spending, some increase in economic activity. And at the least, you would expect that sort of bump, temporary upturn in terms of spending, consumption spending, and overall spending during that period. We have, over the years, demonstrated over a number of years, relatively a peaceful election. So typically, you can anticipate overall a positive outcome in terms of the election cycle. Potentially, you could say, if that were not the case, then you could say, negative impacts if there was violence, etc. But we haven't seen that for a number of years, and I think it's a testament to the strong, whether the EOJ and the overall framework and the maturity, I think, of the country as a democracy and the interest of citizens for peaceful, fair, transparent elections.
Thank you, Dr. Henry. Thank you, Jane. I think that concludes the questions. One more, Gwyneth? Okay, there's one more coming. Has the impact of US tariffs now been fully understood and reflected on economic data, or is uncertainty still a concern? And this is also from Siobhan Campbell.
All right, thanks, Siobhan. So there is still a lot of uncertainty. And so to answer the question, you say, has it been fully understood? No, still uncertainty abounding. We've seen a dynamic process since the start of the year and the announcement of tariffs and level of impact and rate of impact, the types of goods being on which tariffs are placed, etc. So it's still early, still a lot of uncertainty, and hence the commitment to continue to monitor the space. If you were to coin a word of describing the global economy for this year, it's been uncertainty. Right? If coming out of COVID, 2020, 2021, the word would have been resilience, speaking to describing, the global economy and the ability and the intention to bounce back and to build back stronger, etc. And now, I think that sort of buzzword would be uncertainty. There's a lot of uncertainty. And so there's pressure on planners, there are pressure on those who do forecasts and those who monitor these spaces, those who are engaged in risk management, enterprise engagements and risk scanning. So this is where we are, and we continue to partner with other managers of the economy to monitor these spaces and help to best, we say, future-proof the country, given the different scenarios that could emerge. James?
No, I'll just add that so far we haven't seen any marked change in performance as a result of the tariffs. We continue to monitor, as the DG has said, but so far, no major adverse impacts.
Thank you. That's it. Thank you so much to the journalists for the questions posed, and thank you to Dr. Henry and Mr. Stewart for the responses provided. As I indicated before, we will see you again in mid-November, where we'll be presenting on the July to September 2025 quarter. Thank you for joining us today. Have a good day.